The Nigerian government says stopping gas flaring by 2020 is not going to be possible anymore. How do you react to that?
Well, it's rather unfortunate that the government has chosen to take this position. We've been hearing about this issue of wanting to stop gas flaring from as far back as the 80s. And we expected that this time around, there would be a lot more firmness on this issue. Because, one, it's money that is being flared. The business person in me says, why are we wasting so much money that could have even been used to develop this country, especially at times like this, when we complain so much about paucity of funds in government and things like that. However, it's also worrisome that we are unable to meet up with this deadline. I don't know what the new deadline is going to be, but it was pretty obvious to us that we were not going to meet up.
It was obvious we are not going to meet up.
It was obvious.
There are a lot of non-governmental organizations working to make sure that gas flaring is also stopped in Nigeria. And I believe Singh also must be doing something in that. What else do you think Nigeria can do to make sure that gas flaring is stopped? Considering that money is being lost and lives as well.
Well, first and foremost, government has imposed fines on the oil companies. We believe that this is not adequate. We need to increase these fines to make sure that there is a penalty for punishing our people this much. And then secondly, we also believe that these fines should also go to the communities. It shouldn't be a federal government thing, but it should be used to provide maybe healthcare and other palliative measures so that the people,
communities,
so that the people who are actually directly affected by this thing are also able to get some kind of relief, because the conditions in which they are living is rather sad and painful.
Are we just allowing the Nigerian government to continue to shift the post each time we are getting there?
Like I said earlier, we had a walk, an awareness walk, and a lot of demands were made. Sing as an organization is also we're also putting together an environmental summit as well, where we're going to bring in all the stakeholders to also come out and let the oil companies even come and tell us why is it that they are even wasting money. They're supposed to be business people. They should also come and tell us their side of the story, because in all of these, they seem to have been silent. And that is a cause for concern for us, because we do not understand why they will be silent. Because ultimately, if that environment is no longer there, what will happen to their businesses? So we are doing a lot. We are doing a lot of engagement with the communities, because we visited 3 of such during that walk. Okay. And we are still doing a lot of community engagement to even hear from them what are the effects, because they complain of strange ailments within such localities. So we're also trying to see how we can engage some experts as well in the medical field to also tell us if really there's a nexus between some of these ailments and the gas flaring issue.
Okay, as a head of partnership in an environmental related non-governmental organization, if you're in a position to advise the government on what to do, apart from what they have already done, what would your advice be?
My advice to the government would be very, very, very simple. I'm not saying it should be easy, okay, but I'm saying it should be simple. Simple in the sense that, look, you just have to tell these oil companies, if you cannot do things the way you do it in other parts of the world, then just pack and go. Shut down your operations.
You think that will work?
It will work.
Then why has it not been done?
Well, why has it not been done? It's a very, very complicated system. It's a very, very complicated system that has lots of different players and different interests as well at play. Because we have a situation where people allege that the community leaders go to these oil companies and they collect money from them and they are silent. We also have accusations that even government officials are also complicit in the corruption that has gone on in the oil sector. So it's an admixture of so many different factors at play that always stops this. But when you tell the oil companies, look, you just have to do things the right way, I'm very, very sure that they would comply. They are business people.
You just mentioned the issue of corruption. And according to the Mr. President, corruption is one of the things that is keeping us where we are right now. How do you think this can be checkmated?
Well, very simple. A lot more transparency, one. And then secondly, the way and manner that the whole social responsibility thing is managed is poorly managed, because we have a situation where these people just give handouts. So if I come to one of the oil majors, for example, and I say, look, I'm from Polapo community in Bayelsa State. Our people are suffering. This. And the oil company just gives me a little bit of cash, and it ends there. So we need to change the way that social responsibility is handled. It has to be something that is measurable, and it has to be something that does not involve transfer of cash from A to B, but rather it should be in terms of things that the community needs. We should have a bottom-up approach rather than the top-down where the players just give. But we should engage with the communities. What exactly are your needs as a people, and how can we come in? We saw situations where contracts are awarded. The people who take these contracts don't execute. So you go to a community, for example, and you are seeing about 4 different water projects, all of them incomplete. And you begin to wonder, how did they even decide that it was water that was the most pressing need of this community? And if really it was, how come there are different people who are doing this same project and all of them have ended up the same way? So there's a need to change the way social responsibility is done in the Niger Delta. The era of handouts has to end, really.
Thank you. The era of handouts by oil companies has to end so that corporate social responsibilities will be redirected. I've been speaking with Mr. Mohammed Bassa, the head of Partnership Sustainable Initiative for Nurturing Growth, Sing Nigeria. Thank you very much. There's serious flood challenge going on all over the country. How do you view it? The flood, do you think Nigeria is ever prepared for flood?
Well, Nigeria is hardly ever prepared for anything, but we had heard from earlier in the year that there are going to be floods, and it's rather shocking that the level of preparedness is what it is. But however, we believe that it can be better managed, even though we cannot stop floods from happening, but it can be better managed.
How?
The level of preparedness can be improved upon. Okay, we know that there's going to be flood in, say, River State. So where are we going to move the people in those areas to? And how do we get them ready for emergency movement? How have we been able to educate them on how to react when these things happen?
Yeah, you just took me to my next question, which is always telling people to move. You're telling me to move from point A to no point. Do you think the Nigerian government is doing enough in this movement advice that they are always giving to the citizens without making adequate provision of where to move to?
Well, I think governments can do more. In fairness to them, they can do more. Of course, in the past, we have also, as an organization, SING has made several calls in the media calling on governments to make long-term plans, because some of these things, the issue of flooding is an admixture of both nature and nurture. nature in the sense that with the global warming and stuff like that, rising sea levels, there's bound to be higher rainfall than in the past. Nurture in the sense that the way we do development in Nigeria, the way communities spring up, the way cities are built, does not make provision for excess water to be effectively drained. So it's an admixture of both, and in both ways the government has to be more forthright, the government has to be more forthcoming, the government has to be more proactive in ensuring that when people build houses, there is provision for drainages, and the government is there to supervise, to ensure that these things are put in place.
Okay, let me bring it back to your organization. What would you say Sing as an organization has done on its own to make sure that, to make the life of people in the Niger Delta more comfortable?
Well, we've been doing a little as our power has permitted us within the confines of the little resources that we've been able to mobilize. Mainly, we have a community center in a small community called Opume in Bayelsa State. That center has a library. It also has a computer training center, and it has an early childhood development center. So that ECCD center trains children at the nursery school level, because we believe very strongly that if the foundation is right, then they will get it right throughout their education. But if the foundation is shaky, there will be problems. Through our ICT center, we also make sure that we expose these children to the best in the world, so they are able to compete with their mates. Because today the world is globalized, and competition is no longer between the young man in Rivers and the guy in Maiduguri, but rather they are competing against their peers from places as far as Bangalore in India, Shenzhen in China, and the rest of them. So we try to give them the skills to be able to function and to compete in this computer-driven age.
Do you consider gender balance when training these children?
Oh yes. Our selection criteria is usually 60-40 at the minimum. 60 for the female gender, because we are very particular about them, and we know the dangers that they are exposed to in the area where we work, which is the Niger Delta, because you have high incidences of things like teenage pregnancy. You see a 30-something-year-old that is already a grandmother because she probably had a child when she was 16, and her child whom she had when she was 16 has a child at 15. So at 30-something, you're a grandmother. So, and all of this is not unconnected to the fact that there is very little opportunities for them. They are given limited education. They are given limited training in terms of skills. So if we are able to skill up these ones, we will also be able to tackle that issue from the roots.
Okay, new ministers were appointed. Okay, new ministers have been appointed, portfolios assigned. We have new ministers of environment, new minister of Niger Delta. Set an agenda for the minister of Niger Delta, the two ministers of Niger Delta.
For the two ministers of Niger Delta, the agenda is simple. The Niger Delta lacks infrastructure. They should work on that. And the young people of the Niger Delta too. Because we must change the narratives about the Niger Delta ultimately. Because right now, when we say Niger Delta, the first thing that comes to mind is militancy and other forms of crime. So they must be able to come up with policies that ensure that the young people of the Niger Delta are productively engaged. A situation where we have unemployment rates of 30-40% in the Niger Delta is absolutely unacceptable, because these youths will ultimately become tools in the hands of people who want to cause trouble.
Okay, what about the Minister of Environment?
Yes, for the Minister of Environment, his work is cut out. The Niger Delta, the Ogoni cleanup is still there. There's a need for it to take off in earnest, and to speed it up as well. So his work in the Niger Delta is pretty much cut out for him.
Is Singh ready to collaborate with these ministries to make sure that most of these things that you have suggested
we're very much open to collaborating with them. We intend to give them a little bit of time to settle into office, and we will definitely reach out to them to let them know of the things that we're doing, and also to invite them as well to collaborate, because development is not a single person responsibility, and it's not a single institution's responsibility, but rather there should be collaboration among multiple actors. The private sector doing their parts, the government doing their parts, we as a non-governmental organization as well also doing our parts. So in all, by the time everybody does their parts, then we'll have a better society.
Let's talk about the Ogoni cleanup. We cannot conclude this interview without looking into it. Recently, there was a call by your organization saying that the office of the cleanup should be moved to Ogoni. That story was widely carried and reported, and I'm sure it has not been done. How are you going to make sure, through these new ministers that have just arrived, that the issue of Ogoni cleanup is polished up and you bring it up for them to look into?
Well, when it comes to dealing with government, the engagement never ends, and we'll continue to engage with them. We'll continue to call them, put out calls to them through the media, and we'll continue to reach out to them in person as well, because the engagement never ends. There must always be a sort of a loop between the government and the governed, ensuring that the government is at every point in time educating the people on what it is doing and why and how it's going to impact them, and the government is also taking feedback from the people on how their policies, their projects, and their programs affect them, and what areas they also still need interventions.
You said during one of your answers, you said the issue of militancy can be linked. You tried tracing the issue of militancy to environmental degradation. Can you shed more light on that?
The Niger Delta people are predominantly fishing. They have a culture of fishing, and they also farm. Now, environmental degradation comes in the form of pollution of the land, which means that the yields are no longer good enough to encourage people to farm, and pollution of the waters as well. So people cannot fish, they cannot farm. What other alternatives do they have? They have to make a living, and so they take to militancy, kidnapping, and all the other kinds of crimes that we hear about in that region. So we cannot take that the increase in the level of crime away from the fact that we have not been doing our oil exploration the right way.
When you compare Nigeria to other countries where oil is being explored, do you think, how would you rate us as a country?
Well, the ratings are there in the international community. Gas flaring, for example, which is still an issue here in Nigeria, has been eliminated in so many other parts of the world. So Nigeria is also part of this same world. They are also part of this same international community. So we must ensure that we also meet up to what is obtainable in other parts of the world.
Thank you so much. We're still going on. Let's look at the issue of criminality in the Niger Delta. It's rather heartbreaking that most of the time when people talk about the Niger Delta region, the first thing that comes to the back of our mind is criminality. How do you think the government in that region, the youth, the NGOs can come together to make sure that this image is polished so that the region will look better and more acceptable?
Well, it's by building institutions, Institutions begin from education. We have a whole lot to do in the area of education. There's no reason why any child should be out of school. And even though the issue is more in other parts of the country, we still have out of school children in the Niger Delta. So we must build institutions, and it starts from education. Then secondly, we must ensure that the education we give is also qualitative. It's not just building schools and we say, okay, we're home and dry. We must ensure that it is qualitative, because the world we're living in is changing. The world is changing. Today we have things like electronic vehicles, Internet of Things, robotics, and the rest of them. So the world is changing, and the skills that are needed to function in this world are also changing. So we must ensure that the education we provide also equips these young people to play in this world that is emerging today. The use of the dependence on oil is on the decline. Oil is under attack from the demand side due to the advent of electronic vehicles and all whatnot. So demand will definitely come down. And it's also under attack from the supply side due to things like shale and all whatnot, ensuring that the supply of oil is higher than at any other time. Some 15-20 years ago, the United States barely produced 2 million barrels of oil a day. Today, they are doing 12 million. And by 2025, they may be doing another 20 to 25 million barrels of oil per day. So that means that there's so much oil in the market, and the price will not go back to what it once was. So we must prepare our people to function in that world. I read a speech one time by Barack Obama where he was complaining about the US educational system, and he said they were sending their children into a 21st century world through the doors of a 20th century education. And it appears that in Nigeria we are doing so through a 16th century education. So the people of the government of the Niger Delta must make sure that they fix education, and fix education in the sense that you are able to produce people who can function, not just people who have pieces of papers that they call certificates and there are no jobs. These people become willing tools in the hands of politicians or other anti-state elements that will use them to foment trouble.
Thank you very much. Don't use the youth in the Niger Delta to foment trouble. The program has been in the news, and I've been speaking with Mr. Muhammad Bassa. He is the head of partnership Sustainable Initiative for Nurturing Growth. You can listen to this program on www.von.gov.ng. My name is Gloria Essien. Thank you very much for coming.